Hey there everyone, welcome back to another video of Mike's Geek Corner with your host, Mike Quevedo. Today we're going to do something called the Pulp Culture Spotlight. And for this first installment, we're going to talk about none other than Robert E. Howard's outcast warrior king, Kull. Now, who is Kull? Well, before Robert E. Howard would grace us all with his very badass barbarian, Conan of Cimmeria, 3 years earlier he introduced Kull in 1929 in the pulp magazine Weird Tales, in the story The Shadow Kingdom. Kull's stories and Conan's stories actually take place in the same universe, although Kull's adventures take place in a preceding era to Conan's. Conan's age is known as the Hyborian Age, and Kull's era is known as the Pre-Cataclysmic Age. The Cimmerians, the race to which Conan belongs to, they're the descendants of Atlanteans, the race to which Kull hails from. So, badassery runs in the family. Nice. In the Pre-Cataclysmic Age, these are the following kingdoms that are established in that world. There are the kingdoms of Camellia, Baluchia, Rondar, Thule, Comora, and then there are other kingdoms of different older races. Then there are the different barbarian tribes. There are the Picts, who lived on islands out in the Western Ocean. And then there are the Atlanteans, who worship the god Balka, and they inhabited a small continent between the Pictish islands and the Thurian continent. And then there are the Lemurians, who dwelt in large islands on the Eastern Hemisphere. As Robert Howard tells us in the segment called Exile of Atlantis, Kull was born in pre-sunken Atlantis in 100,000 BC, into a barbarian tribe in the Tiber Valley of Atlantis. Then, however, the Balian tribe were destroyed by a great flood, and the infant Kull was to be raised by tigers in the wilds as a feral child. After many years, Kull is found and adapted by the Sea Mountain tribe. As he reaches his teens, however, he is exiled from Atlantis for intervening in a sacrifice involving a woman. After he escapes, he is captured by the Lemurian pirates, and he is forced to work as the galley slave for more than a year. But then a mutiny occurs, and this allows him the chance for freedom. Kull becomes a pirate in his late teens, becomes a captain of his own vessel, and he becomes feared in the waters of Atlantis and Thuria. However, his life as a reaver is ended when the Baluchians capture him. They offer him the choice of becoming either a gladiator or execution. He chooses the former. In the gladiator arena, he becomes a force to be reckoned with, and admirers aid on his freedom eventually. He then becomes a mercenary in his 30s, and then promoted to general by the Baluchian king, Borna. Baluchian noblemen, however, become weary of Borna's tyrannical rule, and this leads to a plot which ends with Kull slaying Borna and Kull getting enthroned as the new king of Baluchia. So from here on, most of Kull's adventures deal with him defending his throne from interlopers from the outside and from within his kingdom. The stories that I'll cover will be the ones of longer length, and I'm not going to spoil the climax of the stories for you. And then afterwards, I will give my thoughts on the stories and the character of Kull and the property's potential in today's entertainment venue. And without further ado, let's do the first story, the Shadow Kingdom. Kull is invited to a feast by the ambassador of the Pictish Isles, Kane, who, in spite of the fact that Atlanteans and Picts are ancient enemies, confides in Kull a crucial secret in return to place trust on the Pict war chief, Brule, the Spear Slayer. That night, Brule meets with Kull inside the kingdom of Baluchia, and he reveals to Kull a secret passage in his chambers that leads them both below, where they find a number of the king's Red Slayers dead. Then, both see what appears to be Kull's chief counselor, too, passing through the corridor, holding a dagger heading towards the king's chambers, unaware of their hiding presence. Brule suggests taking another shorter route back to Kull's quarters and tells Kull he should lay in bed, thinking sleep, and await the coming of Tu. As Tu enters the king's chambers and readies to kill the seemingly sleeping Kull, the latter, at the word from Brule, hurls himself at the assassin with sword in hand, slaying Tu. Suddenly, the physical features of Tu begin to fade to reveal the head of a serpent. After explaining that the real Tu is in his own chambers, still sleeping, Brule then tells Kull that the Serpent Men, an ancient humanoid race with skin and heads of snakes, are using their magical powers to disguise themselves and replace Kull as king with one of their own and rule Baluchia as they did centuries ago. Using a specific word that only man can pronounce, Kull and Brule set out to discover the rest of the disguised Serpent Men and cleanse the Baluchian kingdom. Next story, Delcarte's cat, or also known as the Cat and Skull. Putting aside a threat from the necromancer Thulsa Doom, Kull is introduced to Saramis, who is a cat that is 1,000 years old, in the care of noblewoman Delcarte. The cat shows that it has the ability to talk and be all-knowing. The voice from Ceramis also warns Kull of Thulsa Doom's threat, which Kull still responds to with certain disdain. One day, Ceramis tells Kull that his friend Brule has been taken by a monster beneath the surface of the Forbidden Lake. As the king is calling for guards to go searching, the cat's voice suggests that Kull should travel alone, as it is custom that, with the exception of the king, death falls to any man who enters beneath the lake. Once Kull arrives at the lake and dives in searching for the Spear Slayer, he subsequently defeats 3 monstrous creatures beneath the waters, before another snake-like creature efficiently renders him helpless, until he is delivered in the domain under the bottom of the Forbidden Lake. As Kull examines his surroundings within the island kingdom, from the shadows a great number of gluminous-looking beings with luminous eyes approach him. Their king at first takes Kull for a reaver and intends on his doom, but Kull convinces them of his actual intentions. However, the Lake King negates any knowledge of Brule being anywhere in the lake, and though he is aware of the ancient cat, he is unaware of its ability to speak. Kull is provided with a voyage back to the surface, with the intent of sorting out this deceit with Ceramis or whatever twisted force is behind it. Next story. By this axe I rule. A plot to remove Kull from the Belusian throne through means of assassination by a group of nobles and outlaws is taking place after having implemented dissent among the inhabitants of Belusia. The plan, structured by notorious cutthroat Argion, consists of buying one of the king's red guard to have his men removed from their posts outside the king's quarters so to allow the assassination to take place. In the meantime, after Kull broods with regret over the population's discontent over his rule, and also the Belusian laws which stall him from governing the way he would like, he bids farewell to Brule, as he is tasked with accompanying Kanu with a great number of guards to the kingdom of Grondar on diplomatic affairs. That night, the conspirators sneak inside the palace and finally into the king's quarters to find, to their surprise, Kull awake and ready for battle holding an axe. Kull manages to kill a significant number of his thwarters, but his severe wounds will only allow him so much chance without aid of his soldiers soon. Next story. Swords to the Purple Kingdom. Kull is informed by his friend and ally, Count Muron Voravalin, that word has it that an attempt to remove him from the Belusian throne is being considered by Berulian masterminds to implement a coup in the Topaz throne. That night, Kull is unexpectedly visited by a harmless-looking small elder man hanging by the vines outside his window. The wizened man hands Kull a letter, sealed with the royal signet ring that only Chief Counselor 2 possesses. The parchment states that Kull should follow the small elder man where he'll lead him for the sake of his own life and his kingdom. Kull so does follow to what eventually leads him to an ambush orchestrated by Belurians and a mysterious figure called the Masked One in the ruins of the Accursed Gardens, and Kull becomes a helpless prisoner. Around this time, a badly wounded Tu is found by the Farsunian young warrior Dalgar. After Dalgar takes the injured counselor to Brule and tend his wound, Tu explains that someone had struck him by surprise and taken his signet ring. Brule and guards begin to investigate the matter further. In the meantime, Count Velin's daughter, Nalisa, who after failing to persuade her father and Kull to allow her to marry Dalgar due to his Farsunian background, makes an arrangement to meet Dalgar at the Accursed Gardens so they can flee from Belusia and live together. And as she arrives at the ruins to wait for her lover, Belurian rogues capture her and lock her up in the same dungeon as Kull. After she does her best to cut the ropes binding Kull with a piece of marble, the Atlantean snaps his bonds before terminating the life of the sizable Belurian who had opened the cell to take him away. With the door now open, Kull, armed with the dead Belurian sword, and Nalisa make their exit from the dungeon. But they must now try and survive the strongly numbered Belurian soldiers as they both try and fend off their enemies as they stand from a cul-de-sac stairway. The last story. The Mirrors of Tucson. We find Kull in his throne, feeling weary of the tranquility that lays upon Belusia and its borders. After neglecting an invite from Brule to roam the waters with him due to the lack of enthusiasm, a girl of the court approaches him to tell him of the ancient wizard Tucson and his House of the Thousand Mirrors, stating that the wizard holds the secrets of life and death and can speak with the dead and demons from beyond. She advises the king to go see him to help him with his dilemma at hand. Kull is convinced and heads to the Lake of Visions, where the House of Tucson stands. The wizard greets him and offers the king a seat in a throne-like chair to gaze into his mirrors. In one of the mirrors he sees an image of himself that makes him feel petty. In another mirror he sees images of the past when primitive beasts and beast-like men roamed the lands. Then looked into another that showed him the future in which foretold the crumbling of the 7 empires and become forgotten. Kull then looks into another mirror in which he sees what seems like a reflection of himself that has its own individuality, and other visions of strange lands, all of which make him think if his own reality is real or just a dream. The king would leave the House of Mirrors and return to it each following day, with such an urge that he forsakes the affairs of his kingdom, leaving the people to murmur and his soldiers to quarrel among themselves. As Kull is staring at his otherworldly reflection once more, suddenly the mirror shatters and a familiar voice calls his name. And so there you have them. These stories, I think, are so vividly well written. Robert E. Howard is a master of establishing these dreamlike worlds, this very eerie atmosphere, much like his contemporary H.P. Lovecraft. With Kull, just as he also did with Conan, he tackles the theme of barbarism versus civilization. With Kull, you have this, this outsider, right? This pagan, barbarian warrior, now being the king, being surrounded by noblemen, right? The elite, I guess we could, elite-minded people who, don't see him fit because of his background, to be around them. And it makes you think, right, who is more barbaric, really? Kull, who, yes, he's led a violent life to survive, but he's very noble intentioned, and a huge sense of honor. Whereas these guys, they're very vicious despite what their facade may imply. And so I think that's a very interesting contrast. And then, if you happen to like also, the stories by Edgar Rice Burroughs of Tarzan, Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book stories, Mowgli, and also the old Beowulf poems, the Kull adventure should be very fitting for you. It's high adventure as it gets, the type of story and sorcery that only Robert E. Howard could master like no one else. Now, as a intellectual property, I think Kull contains some huge potential to be adapted, I think, either, if not a theatrical film, then certainly a streaming series or cable series, like Game of Thrones. It has that. It has the materials to, it has the politics and the fantastical elements, the fantasy elements, the sword and sorcery elements like Game of Thrones, with the raw material, the greediness of shows like Vikings or Spartacus. Conan supposedly was pitched as a streaming series to Amazon, I think by the writer of The Handmaid's Tale. And so it's heartbroken that they didn't go with it. But if not Conan, then they should definitely look into Kull, because it offers somewhat the same thing, but at the same time it's its own thing. The very substantial difference between Kull and Conan is with Conan you're dealing with a pirate or as a thief. That's the predominant known feature of Conan. Whereas with Kull it is that he's a king, and he must defend his throne against conspirators. So there it is. That's Kull for you. Hope you found this character intriguing. You will go out and read those stories, be it in the... You can find many of the old editions on Amazon or eBay. So, and the comic books also from Marvel and Dark Horse. You want to check them out. They adapt the stories as well in those. They take some liberties, yes, and they do pastiches, but they're still very, for the most part, all of them, the majority well written. And obviously the illustrations, the artists like John Buscema, Mary Severin, Mike Ploog, Bernie Wrightson, so many artists who rendered Conan amazingly. Their story really captured the Howard world. And so there it is. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, make sure you subscribe, and I'll be seeing you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.